Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, in my introduction to the Torah reading, I said that there was an intimate connection in the Torah between the location of the central shrine, or the fact of the central shrine, the only place where animals could be sacrificed, and the consumption of meat. Okay, and this is emphasized by the fact that the tractate in the Talmud, which deals with the slaughter and consumption of meat, is called chulin. Okay, chulin means secular things or everyday things, as opposed to the tractate which deals with the laws of sacrifices, which is called Kodashim, okay, holy things, right? So now in the Talmud, we have two different types of slaughtering animals: chulin, everyday things, and Kodashim, holy things, sacrifices. Okay, now why is this significant, right? Well, it's significant because prior to the laws in this week's Parsha, domestic animals could only be killed and eaten as a sacrifice. Okay, so this made sense, right, when there were local altars, right? There was a local altar in every major town, and there was a Kohen, a priest there, and you brought the animal for a sacrifice, right? And the Kohen slaughtered it and offered it up on the altar, which meant cooking, right? And some of it you and your family would eat, and some of it would go to the Kohen, and a very small part of it would be burnt up entirely, right? But our Torah portion says, no, can't do that, only in Jerusalem. Okay, so now you may ask, if the Torah in Deuteronomy says you can't do that, you can't have these local shrines, right? Why do the books of Judges and Kings and Chronicles tell us about these local shrines, right? I mean, on Rosh Hashanah, we read the Haftarah, where Hannah prays to have a child, and where does she go? She goes to the local shrine, and there's a Kohen there named Eli, so forth, right? So you may say, wait a second, didn't these people for 200 years know about the book of Deuteronomy? And I'm going to say, actually, no, they didn't. Yeah, my
Deuteronomy lost for some time.
what?
Deuteronomy lost for some.
Lost or forgotten, or maybe not even composed or given, but yeah, right? But exactly. But again, if the Torah was given in its entirety, how is it that the last book got lost? I don't want to go there, right? But the point is that this law in Deuteronomy instituted the requirement that you had to offer your sacrifices only in Jerusalem. Okay, so this is fine, but now it creates a problem, okay? I live in, let's say, Beersheba, okay, which is, I don't know, 70 miles or so from Jerusalem, but I don't have a car, right? Because cars haven't been invented, right? And I'm jonesing for a burger. I gotta go out back, grab a cow, schlep the cow to Jerusalem, 70 miles, and then I can have a burger. Might be a good incentive to become a vegetarian, but that wasn't really something that people did. So now we have to have a system where I can eat meat wherever I live without schlepping a live cow or a live sheep or a live goat to Jerusalem. So the Torah says, yes, you can do that. Slaughter it as I have taught you, which implies the existence of the oral Torah, because the laws that we use to properly slaughter an animal aren't written in the Torah, but the Torah assumes that we know them. Okay, and it tells us what animals we can eat, what animals we can't eat, and don't eat the blood, because the blood is the life. So if you want to eat meat, you can, but there are laws that you have to follow. And in my eyes, this is a typical blend of law and pragmatism. So I'm going to say that the Torah is actually the founding document of conservative Judaism, because we try to be pragmatic. We have rules that we are supposed to follow, but those laws are supposed to be reasonable, right? We can't do whatever we want. In fact, the Parsha says that is the wrong attitude, but the Torah doesn't set unreachable goals, right? It's not realistic to expect that people throughout Israel would only eat meat in Jerusalem. It's not realistic. But the Torah doesn't take an all or nothing attitude, and it sets up reasonable criteria for the consumption of meat. And the reason for kashrut, and our Parsha explicitly says that, is holiness. We are to be a holy people, and we are to have respect for life. Okay, and the Torah explicitly says that kashrut will be a mark of Jewish distinctiveness. The Parsha says, don't eat animals that die on their own, but you can sell them to non-Israelites. It's not forbidden to sell non-kosher meat to non-Israelites or non-Jews, right? Because they're not required to keep kosher. And, you know, it's something, I mean, I hear all the time, you can learn a lot about what average Jews really think on Facebook. If you go to the kosher Costco group or the kosher Trader Joe's group, people are constantly complaining. I went to my Costco and the kosher meat was sitting right in the same freezer case or same refrigerator case as the non-kosher meat. Who do I complain to? And the answer, who should you complain to about that? No one. Because it's not a problem, right? As long as it's sealed, right? And you're not going in and buying a fresh steak in Costco from you know, Sam the kosher butcher, right? It's either frozen from, you know, Mr. Teva the kosher butcher, or it's vacuum sealed from Mr. Empire the kosher butcher, and there's no problem with it, right? Kosher and non-kosher can be right side by side, and I'll let you in on a little secret. The average kosher slaughterhouse sells more treif than kosher. Right? How can that be?
Yeah,
The back end,
and all the trade animals.
right, and all the treif animals, you slaughter an animal, and then the boat, they check the lungs, and it turns out that it's not kosher. Throw it away. No, sell it to McDonald's. So the average kosher slaughterhouse sells more treif than kosher. And if they couldn't sell the treif, I mean, you think kosher meat is expensive now? If they had to throw away half of I mean, first of all, I mean, that would be, to my mind, an unimaginable waste. I mean, I'm very strict. One of the sources sometimes of conflict in our house is the question of leftovers. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, any food that once had a face is not to be thrown away. I at any rate eat leftovers. Okay, so the Torah then goes on, be careful to observe only that which I command you. This is known in halacha as bal tosi. Don't add, don't make up new mitzvot. And then in 14, it says, you are children of the Lord your God. Do not gash yourselves for the day. And apparently there was a ritualized form of mourning where people did actually cut themselves in grief. And Shiite Muslims still do this. The Shiites have a holiday called Ashura, which is the day of mourning for Imam Hussein, the grandson of Muhammad. And this is where the Shiites and the Sunnis split. The Shiites followed Hussein, and I mean the Shiites, and the Sunnis followed, I don't remember who else, but they cut themselves. They have a procession with swords, and they cut themselves in mourning, and we don't do this. What?
You know, our clothes.
Cut our clothes, but we don't cut our flesh. Not exactly the same thing.
Well, I think the point is that now, now we use a little black ribbon, but when I was a child, they did rip my grandparents.
Right, well, some people still rip their clothing, but the point is, right, not your flesh. That's the point. Okay, and that, don't cut yourself for the dead. The Hebrew is lo tigodedu. But the Talmud reads that as lo ta'asu agudot, don't separate yourselves into factions. But kashrut has become quite the opposite. It's not a unifying factor anymore. It's a separating factor. When I was growing up in the holy city of Brooklyn, it was very common for people who themselves were not so observant to have kosher homes so that any Jew would feel comfortable eating there. How many people, I'm not asking if your family personally, but how many people knew folks who weren't so observant? Maybe they didn't keep kosher themselves, but they had a kosher home so that other people would be comfortable eating there. Raise your hands. Okay, so close to half. Today, Gornish telephone, right? There's no point in it because the distrust between different types of Jews is so great. I do not believe that, well, in fact, I know that Orthodox Jews would not eat in my home. And for example, once I realized that that was the case, I stopped buying cheese with a hedge. Because I'm fine with regular cheese, but if I want my Orthodox friends to eat in my home, I'll buy only kosher cheese. But if they're not gonna eat in my home anyway, what's the point? The regular cheese is half as much money and twice as good, except, by the way, at Costco, natural and kosher shredded Mexican blend or shredded mustard, not that expensive and very good. So this is a little pitch for Costco. Yeah, I'm gonna get a kick.
For the breakfast,
Okay, great.
macaroni and cheese, yeah.
Okay, I'll have to put in my chip for that rebate, yeah.
Rabbi, you made several points as we were moving along, and we know that a good portion of history was oral. My question is, if God gave it was, I don't have to use your words about when it's going, but if it was given that we were supposed to have enough sense, to make some common sense distinction, who decided along the way? Did the rabbis over time that in some ways are altering or moving away from or allowing more freedom to the Torah says? Or did the actual individual do?
I think sometimes it's both, okay? The question is, if we're supposed to be unified and have a uniform set of laws, how did it start diverging? Was it the people? Was it the rabbi? I'll give you an example and then I'll go on. I attended a scholar in residence weekend years ago in the previous century with Rabbi Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, who is the son of late Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, and he wrote a wonderful article called Rupture and Reconstruction, which really bewails the growth of humras, of stringencies in the Orthodox community, but he gave, actually, I remember this was actually not even part of his lecture. We were just sitting in the bar, and he said, he gave an example of it going the other way. He said one time his mother had had a heart attack and she was in the hospital for a few days, and he and his father were in charge of the kitchen, and they did what, as Talmud scholars, they knew that the Talmud actually requires. And he said, when my mother came home from the hospital and saw what my father and I were doing in the kitchen, she almost had another heart attack. Because there's nowhere in the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, any of the codes of law that says you should have a fleshig dish towel and a milchig dish towel. No, but everyone knows you have a fleshig dish towel and a milchig dish towel, but they didn't know because it's not written in any of the law codes, right? So, all right, so I'm on the point of humras. A humra is a stringency that's sort of above and beyond the required baseline practice. The greatest humra of our age is what? Blot kosher. What does blot mean? It means that they expect after every cow or sheep or goat, I mean, not that we're eating so many sheep or goats, but their lungs are inspected. And if there are certain adhesions, then the bodek, the inspector comes and checks it. And then the bodek can pass it or not. Say, yeah, these are still okay, or no, this cow is straight, sell it to McDonald's. But glot kosher means an animal which the bodek okayed, we still don't eat it. Because glot means smooth, and it means the lungs are smooth. And until 40 years ago or so, everyone except Hasidim and Sfaradim ate regular kosher meat. But now the OU and the other agencies only certify glot. Perfectly kosher, non-glot meat, they won't certify it. And of course, go to Costco, get ground turkey, chicken, whatever, from Empire, and what do you say, OU glot. I can promise you, nobody is inspecting chicken lungs or turkey lungs. So therefore, there's no such thing as glot poultry. But, oh, it says OU, but it doesn't say glot, so I can't eat it. So they put glot on there, okay? The same reason this bottle of purified water has an OU on it. It's water. Water is kosher. But it doesn't say OU, I can't buy it. Okay, we'll put an OU. I'm waiting for glot water, right? So far, we only have regular kosher water, not glot kosher water. But, so glot is one chumrah, but there's also others, and I'll give you one that I literally learned about this week. Again, actually, this is on the Is It Kosher Facebook group. Artichokes. I mean, canned or jar. Okay, and no reputable certifying agency will certify artichokes. Why?
I think have a farm, I don't know if there's that farm, but it's all fertilized by the word out.
Doesn't matter. Bugs, right? The bugs crawl in between the leaves and they're hard to see. So we won't certify artichokes anymore. So now artichokes are trace. I have never been to Rome, but one of the great dishes of Roman cuisine is carciofi alla Judea, which they'll usually translate as Jewish style artichokes, but they really mean Judean style artichokes, because, at least according to legend, that recipe was brought from Judea to Rome in 70 CE, when the Jews were exiled to Rome. So now, I guess, this 2,000+ year old recipe from Parashat Re'eh is now trade. Okay, and I have been decrying this growth of Humrah, but at the same time, we're at fault too. We're at fault too because not enough of us, by us I mean conservative Jews, not enough of us keep kosher. Like, for example, Wegmans used to sell, or used to offer for sale more accurately, regular kosher meat, as a triangle pig. I mean, they still do Hebrew national hot dogs. But 90% of the purchases of Hebrew national hot dogs are not Jewish. So that's an exception, right? But they used to offer regular kosher meat. Trader Joe's used to offer regular kosher meat, and guess what? If I run a store and I'm carrying a product that nobody's buying, I'm not carrying it anymore. And if there were more conservative Jews who kept kosher and said regular kosher meat is fine with me, and by the way, regular kosher meat is fine. Okay? I eat Hebrew national hot dogs quite regularly, and I would buy the Trader Joe's or the Wegmans non-blot meat if they still carried it, but they don't carry it anymore because there's not enough of a market for it. So if more of us kept kosher, there would be more stuff that meets our standards. For example, why is there no great Jewish deli in the Washington area? People say, oh, Parkway or whatever. From people who know, no, it's not. I mean, go to Second Avenue Deli and you know what real good deli is. Why is there no? Right, because it's impossible to make a living from an Orthodox certified deli, because you gotta close one day in 7, you gotta close for all of Pesach, you gotta close for 2 days of Yom. A third of the year, you can't even be open, right? So I'll tell you what, I mean, I mentioned Second Avenue, right? Second Avenue is certified by conservative rabbis. It's open on Shabbos. I wouldn't go there on Shabbos, but there are halachic ways to allow it to be open on Shabbos. Okay, but the Orthodox community won't accept it, also because it's not blot, and that's fine. But there are enough people in New York who keep kosher, who aren't Orthodox, that, Second Avenue rather, can survive. And I'll tell you what, if our friend, what's his name? Yeah, if he wanted to open a kosher deli around here that was open 7 days a week, I would give it certification. I would find enough other conservative rabbis and we would give it certification. But there aren't enough, I think, kosher keeping conservative Jews to make that demand, because even so, that the cost of that deli would still be more than a non-kosher deli. You gotta buy kosher meat, you can't sell dairy, et cetera, et cetera. But if there were more of us who kept kosher, there would be more stuff that meets our standards that are more, shall we say, reasonable standards. Okay, so it's, in my eyes, it's unfortunate that Kashrut has become, instead of something that unifies us, something that divides us. And I like to give a little hope. I don't know, maybe at some point there will be suspicion. There was somebody who stopped the madness, right? Let's stop the madness, stop the humras, and figure out a way that we can all keep kosher according to the same norms.
Yeah.
Shabbat shalom, yeah.
Back to your items. since there's a whole other revolution in I don't know if I'm going to say most or many or whatever, but my thinking is when anybody who either does get kosher or is thinking about being kosher, when there's questions, they ask about their own out. And there's a standard that I think everyone's heard of the number changes, that, you know, if you ask a question, you ask the rabbi, and when you.
Right.
Well, there's no much to handle, but the practice is that we learn from rabbis. So the point that you're making, you all have a central kind of umbrella organization. Is there any idea amongst rabbis themselves to get together to look at this code instead of the politics that goes on with the organization, isn't that whatever?
But there's not, because there's no, I mean, we don't have a code. And, you know, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but the point, I'll give you an example of things that do happen. Okay, so within the conservative movement, there are different attitudes towards eating cheese that doesn't have kosher certification. So we, in our house, use cheese that doesn't have certification. But if I'm having another conservative rabbi over for a meal, I'll say to them, you know, beforehand, by the way, we use cheese without certification, is that okay? And if she says, yeah, that's fine, then fine. And if she says, no, I only eat certified kosher cheese, I'll say, be all right if we used our dairy utensils and I'll buy kosher certified cheese for this. No, that's not, all right, so we'll do parb or whatever. And so there's that level of mutual trust. The problem is, and that would be fine. In other words, if different groups had different standards, but they trusted each other. I mean, the Talmud says that Hillel and Shammai had different standards on everything, but they trusted each other. So the problem is not as much that we have different standards as that we no longer trust each other. That, I think, is the root of the problem. And if we started to trust each other, I mean, I'll give you an opposite example. Okay, Rabbi T, who used to give classes here, but I asked him once about Chalav Yisrael. Chalav Yisrael means milk that was milked with a mashgiach watching the cow be milked, which mostly in America we don't require because the government is the mashgiach. If it says milk, it has to be cow. All right, but like, you know, different communities like Chabad only Chalav Yisrael. Right, so I asked Rabbi T, who's not Chabad, he's Litvak, but very frum. I asked about Chalav Yisrael, and he said, I observe it as a personal humor, as a personal stringency. The rest of my family doesn't. So my Chalav Yisrael stuff and their regular stuff live happily side by side in our refrigerator. And that would be a great, and in some places, because in Baltimore, of all of the certifying authorities, they're the most reasonable. Which isn't necessarily saying much, but they are. So you go to a restaurant and they'll say, you know, you can get Chalav Yisrael cheese or not Chalav Yisrael cheese. You can get Yashan, not Yashan. Okay, so there is that level of mutual trust. But to my mind, that's the big issue. It's not so much merely the existence of different standards, but the lack of mutual trust. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Drasha.